The story begins on a quiet, empty stretch of County Road 18 just outside Denver, the kind of road where silence feels heavier than sound and the night stretches endlessly in all directions. The hum of an old pickup truck cut through the darkness, its headlights slicing across the cracked asphalt as Daniel Reed tried to fight off exhaustion from another long day. The dashboard clock blinked 11:43 p.m., and the rain had just started to fall, soft at first and then heavier, smearing the glass in rhythmic streaks. He was thinking about his son, Ethan, probably asleep by now in the neighbor's care, and how he hated being late again. His mind was full of numbers, unpaid bills, and the dull ache that comes with working too hard for too little. But that night, all those thoughts vanished in a single instant. Just a few miles from home, something appeared on the road ahead, small at first, just a shadow slumped on the side of the shoulder. Daniel slowed down, squinting through the rain, expecting to see a dead animal or debris from another storm. But as his truck crept closer, his stomach turned. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. He slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding slightly on the wet pavement, the truck jerking to a stop. The headlights cast a pale glow over the figure, a woman, motionless, lying face down on the side of the road, her clothes torn and soaked, her skin smeared with blood and mud. For a second, Daniel froze, his breath catching in his throat. He jumped out of the truck, the cold rain instantly biting into his skin. "Hey! Hey, can you hear me?" he called out, his voice trembling as he knelt beside her. She didn't move. Her face was bruised, her hair tangled, and her lips pale blue. He gently turned her over, and her eyes flickered open just enough for him to see the terror behind them. She tried to say something, but no sound came. Her body shuddered, and when he touched her shoulder, she winced in pain, her whole frame tightening as if frozen. It took Daniel only a second to realize she couldn't move. He tore off his jacket and wrapped it around her shaking body. "Hold on," he whispered, fumbling for his phone. The signal flickered between one bar and none, but finally, he got through to 911. His voice shook as he explained what he'd found. The operator's calm voice guided him through the next steps. "Keep her warm, don't try to move her, keep her talking if she can speak." He crouched there in the pouring rain, holding his jacket tight around her, watching her chest rise and fall shallowly. "You're gonna be okay," he kept saying, though he didn't know if she could even hear him. Minutes felt like hours before the sound of sirens echoed through the darkness. Flashing red and blue lights painted the wet road, and paramedics rushed to the scene. They worked quickly, stabilizing her neck, checking her pulse, lifting her onto a stretcher with careful precision. Daniel stood back, soaked and speechless, watching as they placed an oxygen mask over her face and wheeled her toward the ambulance. One of the medics asked his name, and he stammered, "Daniel Reed. I found her." When they asked if he knew her, he shook his head slowly. "No, but she didn't deserve this." As the ambulance pulled away, Daniel remained standing by his truck, rainwater dripping from his hair and jacket. The quiet returned as the lights disappeared down the road, leaving only the hum of the storm and the faint smell of wet asphalt. He didn't know why, but he couldn't bring himself to drive off right away. Something about that woman's face, that faint flicker of life in her eyes, had struck him deep. He thought about his son, how he would feel if someone he loved was left alone like that. Eventually, he climbed back into the truck, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The image of her, helpless and broken in the rain, stayed with him long after he pulled away. By the time he got home, dawn was creeping up behind the mountains, painting the sky in gray and pink. Ethan was asleep on the couch, his small hand clutching a toy car. Daniel sat on the edge of the chair beside him, staring blankly at the wall. He couldn't shake the sound of her faint breathing, the way her lips tried to form words. Who was she? What had happened to her out there in the dark? The next morning, his phone rang. It was the county sheriff's office, asking him to come in for a statement. They wanted details: what time he found her, what she was wearing, if he'd seen any vehicles nearby. The sheriff told him the woman was alive but in critical condition. She had multiple fractures, severe bruising, and spinal injuries that had left her paralyzed. She carried no identification, no wallet, no phone, only a thin silver bracelet on her wrist engraved with the letters AM. No one had come forward to claim her. No missing person reports matched her description. For now, she was just Jane Doe. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment over and over in his head, the way her eyes had opened, the way her body trembled in his arms. It felt wrong to move on as if nothing had happened. The next morning, he drove to St. Mary's Hospital, where they'd taken her. He told the nurse at the desk who he was, and after some hesitation, they allowed him a short visit. The room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. She looked fragile beneath the white hospital sheets, her face bandaged, her arm resting gently over the thin hospital gown. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure what to say. He pulled a chair beside her bed and sat down. "You probably don't remember me," he said quietly. "But I found you out there. I couldn't just drive by." Her eyelids fluttered, and though she didn't speak, he thought he saw a flicker of awareness, like she recognized his voice, or maybe just the gentleness in it. He didn't know why, but he reached out and placed his hand over hers. It was cold, but it felt human, fragile, real. Leaving the hospital that evening, Daniel realized something had changed inside him. It wasn't pity that kept him coming back, it was something deeper, something that whispered that their lives had crossed for a reason. He didn't know her name or her story, but he felt a strange connection to her, as though fate had chosen that exact moment, that stretch of road, for their paths to collide. And while he couldn't explain it, Daniel knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't walk away from her story until he knew the truth. The morning after the accident, Daniel found himself sitting in the small, fluorescent-lit waiting area of St. Mary's Hospital, the sound of soft footsteps and distant voices echoing down the sterile hallways. He wasn't sure why he'd come back, only that something about the woman he had found lying helpless on that dark road wouldn't leave his thoughts. Maybe it was the way her hand had felt weightless in his, or the faint, broken whispers she had tried to form before she lost consciousness. Whatever it was, it felt personal, as if he owed her more than just being the man who happened to drive by. When the nurse finally called him back, she led him into a quiet room on the third floor. The woman lay there motionless, her face pale against the white sheets, machines softly beeping at her bedside. Her injuries were severe: fractured ribs, a broken arm, deep bruises, and a spinal injury that had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Daniel listened as the nurse explained that she had survived surgery, but her recovery would be long and uncertain. The police still had no leads on who had hurt her or how she had ended up on that desolate road in the middle of the night. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat beside her. For a long moment, he just stared at her face, studying the faint scratches along her jawline and the way her hair, even matted from the accident, framed her face softly. He couldn't imagine what kind of person would do this, leave someone broken and dying on the side of the road. He thought about his own life, about how often he'd been too busy working and worrying about money to notice much of anything outside his world. Yet here he was, unable to walk away from a stranger. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel visited whenever he could. He brought flowers once, though she couldn't hold them, and sometimes he would just sit and talk, even if she couldn't respond. He told her about his son, Ethan, about how he loved drawing and how he wanted to be a firefighter someday. He talked about his job at the auto shop, about the customers who argued over prices, and about how lonely it felt sometimes to eat dinner at the same small kitchen table every night with just the sound of cartoons in the background. Somehow, it felt easier talking to her than anyone else. One afternoon, when he came by after work, a nurse told him the woman had woken up for the first time since the night of the accident. His heart jumped. He walked into the room quietly, unsure if she would remember anything. Her eyes were open now, clear but cautious, following him as he approached. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Hey there. You probably don't know me, but I'm Daniel. I was the one who found you." She blinked slowly, her lips parting just slightly. "You helped me," she whispered, her voice weak and broken from days of silence. That he nodded. "Yeah. You scared the hell out of me, to be honest. I thought I was too late." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, she turned her head toward the window, unable to speak. Then she whispered, "Thank you." It was barely audible, but Daniel felt it hit deep. He shook his head and said softly, "You don't need to thank me. You just focus on getting better." Over the next few days, she began to speak a little more, and Daniel learned her name, Claire. Claire Matthews. She didn't remember much about the night she was hurt, only flashes of headlights, a voice yelling, and the sound of tires screeching before everything went black. The police were still investigating, but without more information, progress was slow. Claire had no family nearby, no one who came to visit. She told Daniel that she had moved to the city a year ago for a job and had been living alone. Daniel found himself growing protective of her. He brought her small things, books, coffee she couldn't drink yet but loved the smell of, and stories about Ethan that made her smile faintly. It was strange how natural it felt to care about her, like he'd known her longer than a few weeks. Each time he left the hospital, he thought about how easily their worlds could have never collided if he had taken a different road, or been just a few minutes later. One evening, as he was leaving, the nurse stopped him and said, "She asks for you, you know." every morning. The words stuck with him on the drive home. He realized that somewhere between guilt and compassion, something else had begun to take root, a connection that neither of them had expected but both somehow needed. What had started as a moment of chance on a rainy road was slowly becoming something that felt almost like fate.